Today, we sit on the cusp of what may be a devastating military conflict in West Asia, one which surpasses the destructive nature of any war seen in the region up until the present time. How we in the West react to this war as it unfolds will be quite important to determining the course of the war and possibly even the future of humanity. If we give our governments free rein to conduct this war as they see fit, there will be a heightened risk that it will spin out of control. The global economy will suffer severe, perhaps even irreparable harm. The geopolitical status quo in West Asia and even beyond West Asia will be irreparably harmed. And even there's a possibility, we can't exclude it, that we may descend into a nuclear conflict at some stage. Now, if on the other hand, we in the West scrutinize very carefully the causes and consequences of this war and hold our governments to task and demand that they conduct any further military operations in the Middle East with great care and scrupulous regard for international law and human rights, then we are less likely to find ourselves in a very painful place as this war unfolds and when it is ultimately concluded. And how we will respond is not only extremely important, but it is going to be influenced to a considerable degree by our preconceived notions about West Asia, and particularly our adversaries, whom I'm going to refer to as the resistance. And I know that in Canada and other Western countries, referring to these groups, these militant groups, and to Iran, which are fighting against Western hegemony in West Asia, as the resistance is controversial. But I think that that is the most accurate term. And if we're going to apply to these organizations the term terrorist, there's no rational explanation for why we don't apply that term even more readily and even more frequently to the United States and to Israel. In any event, because I think it's very important for us as citizens to approach this war in an informed way, I've decided to launch a new series of interviews, which will be titled Women of the Resistance. You know, we have this narrative that's been out there in the West for many years that the resistance to Western hegemony and Israeli domination in the region of West Asia is comprised primarily of young men who are fanatically Muslim and who are bent on destroying Israel simply because they have an irrational racist hatred of the Jewish people. And also, we've been told that the resistance, what I refer to as the resistance, quote unquote, hates our freedoms. This is a line that was used by the Bush administration and its advocates when the Bush administration and the British government of Tony Blair launched a criminal war of aggression in Iraq. I think the reality, however, is that our governments hate the freedoms of the people living in West Asia and in any country. They hate the freedoms of the people in any country that refuses to submit to the domination of the United States government and its Western proxies and allies. So in order to challenge this narrative, which threatens to influence our views about this war in ways that will ultimately be very harmful to many people, including to ourselves, I want to spend some time in my program meeting women who are participating in some manner in West Asia in the resistance, because I think we'll get some insight into the reality of these organizations and what they're really trying to achieve and who is fighting on their behalf. Today, this will be my first episode in Women of the Resistance, and I'm going to be interviewing Marwa Osman. Marwa Osman is a Lebanese journalist based in Beirut. She works for Press TV. She has a PhD in media management. She comes from a village bordering upon Israel, and we're going to talk to her today about her background, her experiences as someone involved in her own way in resistance to Western hegemony in the region, and about where this extraordinarily dangerous war is likely to go. So here's my interview today with Marwa Osman. I hope you'll find it informative. Marwa, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on my program for the very first time.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So Marwa, we originally came to know each other, as I recall, when I was in Lebanon last year, reporting on the ground about the conflict with the Zionist colony. and the economic crisis in the country. And you reached out to me in your capacity, as I recall, a journalist with Press TV to conduct an interview. But I never actually had the opportunity to meet you in person, even though we maintained an online dialogue since then,
Yeah.
until we were both in Venezuela this past weekend. And it was a pleasure to meet you, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to actually speak face to face and sit beside each other, listening to the speech of Nicolas Maduro. And before I talk to you about Venezuela, I was hoping you could just take a minute to tell us more about yourself. Where do you come from in Lebanon? How did you end up becoming a journalist for Press TV?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. And it was enjoyable and such a pleasure to meet you and meet a lot of people in Venezuela. We'll talk about that later. But I start my field of studies was not in journalism at the beginning. It shifted when I started a career in journalism, actually, because at first I studied economy and management, and I had a BA in management, and then started shifting in the years of my master's degree, where I had a master's in knowledge transfer and media institutions, and then later on in management and media management as well, and PhD, which I got in 2019 from the École Doctorale of the Lebanese University. And it was a long way because I was also in the means of building up my own family unit. I started my second master's degree. I was pregnant with my first child, and throughout, I was having more certificates. I was pursuing more education, and my PhD, I literally gave my dissertation to my supervisor and the second reader, the first and second reader, when I was 9 months pregnant with my third child. So it was like parallel, creating the family and doing also trying to build a career for myself. And throughout, it was in 2009. 3 years after the 2006 war, because that was the major shift in my life. In 2006, I was still a first year college student and studying economy and management, and the war against Zionist Israel started, and they decimated, as you know, Beirut, the capital, and its suburbs. And it was the first time I entered into politics in specific, because I was not born in Lebanon. I was born somewhere else. And I came to Lebanon later in my years to pursue my education and start my university studies. So I was not really born in the politics of Lebanon. I had to learn it when I came here. And 2006 was a big, big lesson. Since then, I was very much involved in activism, everything that's anti-war, everything that's anti-Zionist Israel, to be honest with you, pro-Palestinian to the bone. Before that, I did know about the calamity of Palestine, but I was not really involved much. So it started, and that shifted my education a bit. And in 2009, I had the opportunity. I was a consultant, part of a consultancy firm for management. And while I was presenting, my job was to present the work that we're doing and do some training for our clients. And I was very young at the time. But while I was doing so, the clients were actually a new TV channel opening in Beirut. And one of the people who are managing the issue said that I have what it takes to be a TV news anchor. And I was like, that is not me. No, you're looking for someone else. But that's how it started, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And from then it went from a TV news presenter into my own show in 2013. And I stopped for a couple of years when I was having my second child, because I was also pursuing my higher education, and I was already teaching.
Now, you come from a village, I understand, in Lebanon called Hiam. I may be mispronouncing that. Could you tell us about this village and what has happened to the village since this genocide began?
Let me tell you about Hiam. Hiam is basically my husband's village. My father's village is Kvardoni. It's like 50 kilometers away from Hiam, but I don't know my father's village. I know Hiam because ever since I met my husband in 2009, and it's been my home. I got to love it. I got to go and see it. I got to be part of its community. And now, and after you get married in Lebanon, a woman gets her new ID, where I take my husband's name and I take his town as my own. And it's now on my ID. I'm from Khiam. And I'm planning to be part of the local authorities when things go right. I'm planning to go for elections there. So keep that in mind. But some seriousness here. Khiam is a bordering town in South Lebanon. It borders occupied Palestine, the northern part of Upper Galilee in occupied Palestine, and it borders the western part of the Syrian Golan Heights. So Khiam is right on a triangle. The last point in the southeastern part of South Lebanon, southeastern part, where you have the Golan, what's known as Mount Hermon, we call it Jabal al-Sheikh, where Syria, the occupied Golan Heights, and to the south is occupied Palestine, known as the Upper Galilee. So that's where Khiam is situated.
Is it close to the Metula, the Israeli Metula military?
It's right there.
Right
yeah,
there.
it's called the Metula settlement, but this is not the name of the town in Arabic, and I don't want to say the wrong name because
right.
Because I know that there's the Tabaraya. I'm not sure if that's part of the Tabaraya, what's known as a Tiberias, or it's part of another authority. So I don't want to say the wrong name, but it is beside the occupied illegal settlement of Metula. Literally,
so what is the condition
above of Metula?
What is the condition
well,
today?
October 7, we were in Khiam because I have a house there. We lived there. And during spring and summer, I completely lived there because I don't even take classes in the university. I just go down to Beirut just to shoot my shows, record my shows, and I go back. Because it's healthy, it's amazing, it's my house, it's my garden, it's the kids' swimming pool, the kids' slides, and it's like a mini resort for my kids where they can do whatever they want, and it's heaven for us. And it's between the mountains, and the nearest neighbor is like 2 kilometers away. So it's amazing to freshen your mind and be sane, be away from the city. But during winter, we usually come to Beirut for school and for my universities as well. But we were on October 7th, we were there. I had family over. I had family coming from outside Lebanon for a vacation, and we were in my house, and it started, and we were watching it minute by minute. And then October 8th at 6:45 a.m., we woke up to the first sounds of bombs that the resistance initiated against the Zionist entity in support of Gaza. And it started against occupied Lebanese land. It was not even inside Palestine. So it was, according to international law, every right for the resistance in Lebanon to conduct those operations, even if there was no Al-Aqsa flood. It was the right of the resistance to conduct these operations. And
Is this the Sheba farm?
It's the Sheba farm. Yeah, it started with the Sheba farms. From the Sheba, it started from Sheba towards the occupied Sheba farms, and from Krafashuba towards the Al-Ramtha and Jal al-Alam bases, which are occupied occupation bases on the top of Mount Hermon. And I was there, and it faces my house. It's not that near, but I can see it. And we were having breakfast while watching the military bases on fire. But midday, while I was in my kitchen trying to cook a meal for my family, and I saw a drone drop the bomb on a mountain that's just 500 meters away from my house. So I saw it drop it. I saw the fireball, and then I screamed for everyone not to be afraid, because there's a big sound coming, because it was like 3 or 4 seconds before we actually heard the sound, and it was terrible. My kids, it was the first time that my kids ever even hear a bullet, not even an explosion, and it was horrifying, because one of my kids, who was usually a bit more afraid than the others, she screamed in a way that gave me a back pain for 1 month, because I've never heard her scream like that. I was surprised by her scream, and it gave me a back pain. So we decided to just leave. The kids don't need to hear this anymore, which, by the way, breaks my heart, because it's been nearly 11 months, and the kids in Gaza have been completely traumatized by this wave of unexplainable, unprecedented terrorism. But Khiam, since that moment, has been a target for Zionist Israel. It's been bombarded heavily. Half of the town is gone. Half of the town completely gone. I mean, not half houses or just like artillery shelling. No. Strikes, airstrikes, the 2,000 pounds kind, the newest kind, provided by the United States of America, paid by U.S. taxpayers, completely decimated my town. And it is amazing to see the people who lost everything still just say, Alhamdulillah, thank God. Thank God we have a resistance that can revenge for us, that can avenge our loss, that can help us rebuild. And yes, it's saddening because for myself, my husband and I, when we bought the land and then started building the house, it took us 9 years to get it up and to live in it. And I've been there by October 7, it was a little less than 1 year when I actually moved to that house. So it means a lot to us. It means definitely a lot than what this Beirut house means, because for us, this is work. Right. That is home in Khiyam. And it just baffles me to see people who have lost not only their houses, but also members of their families saying that we don't care, we're going back, we're going to rebuild, we're going to sit and be there. It's just the spirit of resistance is unbelievably amazing, to a point that it makes you as a human sit and think back, what is your priority in life and how you should face those challenges that you cannot control. And actually, people are still there. My uncles are still there. My husband's uncles are still there. They refuse to leave. We've been pleading for them. Please just leave already. They said, no, there's nowhere else that we need to go. Just one of his uncles who has a herd of sheep and some cows, a farm, basically. He had to move them because the cows were getting frustrated and agitated to a point that some of them stopped producing milk. So he had to fix that because emotionally it was damaging his business, and he had to move all the way to the Baqa. But he keeps
coming, going like every 2 weeks to visit his house.
So in the recent assassination by Israel of the top Hezbollah commander, Fuad Shukur, the pretext that Israel gave for killing him, and also ultimately it killed, as I understand it, I think 3 women and 2 children, and there were Iranian victims as well. It was that, according to the Israeli military, Hezbollah targeted a village, a Druze village in the occupied Golan Heights, and killed, I believe, 12 children amongst, and injured many others. This was the narrative. This was the justification that was given. I understand that this Druze village, Majd al-Shams, is actually quite close to Khiyam. It would be a matter of kilometers.
I see it from my house, especially during the night, because I can see the lights and I can say, that's Majd al-Shams. I'll be talking to my friends in Majd al-Shams saying, just wait for me, I can see you.
And so what do you think of this pretext that the Zionist colony has given for?
Well, I think Majd al-Shams residents themselves, when they kicked out the head of the Majd al-Shams council, who was appointed by the Zionist Israeli cabinet, is a big answer to this question. The people, they kicked out the Israelis. They kicked out Netanyahu himself. He tried to come and they said, you're a war criminal, get the hell out of here. And also Smotrich was kicked out as well. We saw a couple of photos of some of those appointed by the Israeli entities sitting with Benny Gantz, for example, and other Israeli entity leaders, but it was not the families of the victims. The families of the victims kicked out the Israeli entity because they knew that it was a false flag attack by the Zionist entity, because Majd al-Shams since February has been a site for failed Iron Dome missiles. And there are hundreds of videos online that could prove that, how Majd al-Shams and the vicinity of the actual town were being hit by the Iron Dome missiles because the Iron Dome was failing and not getting to the either the missiles or whatnot that Hezbollah was throwing towards occupied Palestine and the occupied Golan as well. And it was horrific. I mean, watching the videos back, because when sometimes things happen and don't really notice, but then when one specific incident happens, you go back and you do the research and you watch and you say, that is horrific. And the fact that the Israelis thought that people will believe is beyond nonsensical. But it's the mainstream media. If you watch any mainstream media news and some of the Arab news as well, you will completely believe that it was Hezbollah that attacked Majd al-Shams, but it's not the case, because why would they attack the town? I mean, since October 8th, they've been attacking military bases. Why would they attack a town? And they have guided missiles, so they would know where that missile is going. That's unbelievable. And why would they attack the Syrian Arabs occupied by Israel? That's absolutely not the case. And by the way, the UNIFIL, which registers the same way we get every hour by hour statements from the resistance telling us what they hit at what time and if there were casualties or not. The UNIFIL, which is basically, for me, Marwa, as a Southerner, I say that the UNIFIL in Lebanon, which is the UN forces imposed on us by the so-called international community, for me, they are agents for Israel. For the Lebanese government and the resistance, that's something else. But for me, as a citizen, they are agents for the Israelis.
Why do
Even
you
those
say that,
agents,
Marwa? Why do you feel that way about
I say that because over the past 12 years, they've been nothing but Israel's ears and eyes inside of villages when they know very well that according to our constitution and our agreement with the UNIFIL forces are not allowed into the towns. They're allowed on the border. You know how many times they were kicked out by Lebanese citizens? You can go and write UNIFIL kicked out by Lebanese Southerners, or South Lebanon, for example, clashes with UNIFIL. Multiple times. At one time, I clashed with them because I was just pumping gas into my car and they were stationed directly facing the gas station for no apparent reason, miles away from the border, from the blue line. And they were using those sensors, interceptors that would not allow my car to start. You know, every car that has a new engine where it's like a press engine, if there's some sort of a nuisance around it, if there's spoofing around it, it won't start. And my car just wouldn't start. At first, I thought there's something wrong with the car and I wanted to call a mechanic. And then the guy at the gas station came along and told me it's them. And he pointed at them. I had to cross the road and I found, if I'm not mistaken, it was a Spanish dude because it was Spanish and Malaysians. So I didn't go to the Malaysian guy because like, I know that they're there like under the wings of the Spanish guy who's going to be the boss in this. So I went to the Spanish guy and I told him, are you jamming my car? Do you have tools that jams? And he tried to speak in a way that as if he doesn't understand. I had my phone with me. I translated it literally on Google Translate and I gave it to him in Spanish. I was like, you either get the hell out of here or I'm going to start breaking your cars because I need to start my car and need to go to work. You're jamming my car. So that's just a little story of what they usually do. Wow. Some of them are really friendly, but they're really friendly to the countryside or to the villages that are not on the border, because on the border they need to keep an eye for Israel. That's what me as a Southerner have seen throughout the years. So even those, the UNIFIL, you can go back to their report about Majd al-Shams and you can see that they say literally, we have no evidence that Hezbollah fired rockets because according to our statement, hour by hour statement, giving who fired what where, there's no firing by Hezbollah at that hour to that area. That's the UNIFIL. But, you know, Netanyahu always has his own narrative to sell for the world. So that in it, there's also something else that implicates the Zionist entity and proves that they are lying, because the very first statements given by leaders in the Zionist entity when they were sure they assassinated Commander Shukr, they said that Shukr was part of the 1983 Beirut barracks, Beirut bomb. You know, remember the embassy bomb in 1983? They said Shukr was behind it. And then they also said that he was behind they named a couple of operations that happened that really hurt the Zionist entity. I'm sorry, but wasn't it you killed him because wasn't the storyline that he was behind Majd al-Shams, right? Their statements prove that they are liars. And at the same time, it implicated them in a war crime because it's a residential area. It's an apartment building. Civilians were killed. 2 children were killed. These children, they have families. They're not just numbers. No child is ever a number. No human is ever a number. But you killed civilians and you assassinated a top commander in Hezbollah. This game of assassination is not played by anyone in the world except Zionist Israel so overtly, so out in the open, despite the fact that it's against international law. And it was illegal in Zionist Israel itself, but they reinstated it in 2002 because that's what they do, because they think that they have an upper hand in everything. I mean, imagine, you know, the level. Let me explain to you who they killed and who was with them. Imagine that the second in command in the Zionist Israeli army, second in command, had a guest who is a consultant from the Congress. That's who was killed. That's the level of the person who was killed. That, and he had a guest over, a consultant from Iran, which, by the way, they have every right to do so. Israel has every colonial entity standing by its side, giving it weapons for free, giving it strategists and generals for free to conduct their operations, and even giving them soldiers for free. Remember, about a month ago when Hezbollah targeted a base about 13 kilometers away from the border in Lebanon, and they killed U.S. soldiers inside of Israel. There you go. They have help from everyone, but it's so halal. It's so okay for them to have that. But we as natives standing together in the same region, trying to find the entity that is killing in a genocidal way our people is some sort of haram. It's illegal. It's forbidden. It shouldn't happen. So that's I need people to understand, because when people say, oh yeah, well, they assassinated someone in Hezbollah, and yeah, he had an Iranian. So what? So what? If a general in the British army had a guest over from the French army and where they were assassinated, it would have been a complete chaos in the world. And for us, this is our army. The resistance is our army. Our sovereignty, our liberation, our freedom is secured by the resistance, and this is who they targeted. So this targeting that was built upon a lie, it was also built upon a war crime, which is why I think that the retaliation would be reciprocal. It will be equal. How? I seriously don't know.
So I'd like to talk to you about the concept of resistance. Of course, resistance can take the form of military action. And when we think about, we've been taught, I believe, in the West to think about resistance amongst Arabs and Muslims to Western and Israeli hegemony in terms of violence. And we are told that it constitutes terrorism, even when the targets are military in nature. So, you know, if the resistance forces in the occupied West Bank, for example, kill an Israeli soldier who's enforcing the occupation, which has now been declared illegal finally by the International Court of Justice, they call that terrorism. So let's just put aside this whole question about terrorism, a term which is grotesquely abused by Western elites and the Western media, never applied consistently.
Sure.
Because, of course, if they applied it consistently, they would declare the greatest terrorist entity on earth to be the U.S. government or Israel. It's either one.
No doubt there.
So
no doubt there.
Let's be serious here. But so I want to talk to you about the other forms that resistance can take.
Sure.
And I myself, and this is why I invited you to be a guest today for my inaugural episode of Women of the Resistance, I regard you as a member of the resistance. That doesn't mean I believe you to be or understand you to be engaged in armed combat. My understanding is you're not in any way.
I wish. I don't know how to operate a gun.
So do you regard yourself as a contributor to the resistance? And if so, in what form do you contribute to the resistance?
That's a big title, Dimitri. It is an honor, obviously. Thank you for the compliment, by the way. But I do understand where you're coming from, and it is resistance to at least tell the truth. When you tell the truth among waves and waves of lies and deception and misinformation, that's resistance. When you continue to go back home despite the fact that it's bombed, it's resistance. When you continue going to school and studying, this is what happened to our students who are presenting their finals. Like, for example, in the US, you have the SATs. In our part of the world, you have a high school diploma that is a certificate given by the government where everyone does equally at the same time in grade 12, the same exam taken nationally. Those students who were stuck in the South under bombardment, they took the exam despite the fact they didn't go to one day of school. They were homeschooled or they were schooled online. Some of them schooled themselves and they went along and they took the highest grades nationally. That's resistance. Resistance is when you have kids. My kids today, we had a sonic boom above Beirut. That's been repeated several times. A sonic boom is when you have a big sound wave that comes from an F-16 jet fighter that is flying at a low altitude. For
and
the
also
simple
breaking the sound barrier. I think that they
yes, breaking the sound barrier.
Right. Understood. Yes.
Yeah, that's called a sonic boom, and Israel has been doing that for the past 3 weeks in Beirut. They've never done it before. The last time they did it was 2006 war. That was it. So it's something new for I think for a generation, for an entire generation that was born after 2006. And for example, my kids today, they were at their summer camp and they heard it, and I was at work. And when a sonic boom happens, or when the sound barrier is broken, and the system of telecommunications in Lebanon gets jammed, because everyone would be calling everyone, because some people still don't know how to differentiate between the sound of a bomb and the sound of a sound barrier being broken. And that's sad to be even talking about it. But because personally, when I witnessed 2006, I'm now an expert in sounds. I know when it is from basically a carrier, an aircraft carrier. If we're being bombed by a ship, I know when we're being bombed by a strike. I know when it's a sonic boom, and I know when it's artillery. So that, because I've lived that life, but I don't want my kids to live it. No one wants that. But resistance is me calling my kids after having the line back on, and my kid bursting out in laughter, telling me that it was so dumb that they, and that's my 12-year-old, telling me that it's so dumb that they resort to such a stupid way of terrorizing us when they know that we don't care. I said, what were you doing? Said, we're just swimming. We continued swimming. They're preparing for a final match at the end of the week. And she said, we just continued. We laughed, and then we just continued with our day. That's resistance coming from a 10-year-old. My 6-year-old came and asked, she always asks, because she can't comprehend what a sound breaker means. What does it mean for a jet to break the sound? So I went to pick him up. She came in the car and said, well, there was a jadar sod. There was a sonic boom today. I was like, yeah, were you afraid? She was like, no. It's like, are you sure? She's like, some kids were crying. I said, did you cry? She said, no, I didn't cry. I asked, did you want to cry? She said, well, maybe. She doesn't even want to tell me that she was slightly scared, because she doesn't want to scare me. That's a 6-year-old that has empathy and compassion more than 10,000 Zionist Israeli soldiers. That's resistance. Resistance is to be able to continue your work while you know that you are cut off from the world. Now, there's no airport, there's no shipments, or shipments are getting tighter. So we are about to be completely besieged. If a war starts, business is still business. We continue working, we continue supporting ourselves. Syria supports us, we support Syria. That's resistance. Resistance, Dimitri, is when you have a family that is already broken down by the financial crisis that happened in Lebanon in 2019, and who were also broken by the August 4, 2020 explosion in the port of Beirut, and who were broken later on by losing their houses because of the Israeli aggression. And you still see them smiling, you still see them preparing weddings, parties, happy, giving you encouragement and telling you to stay strong. And you look at them and you feel like, what on earth happened that made those people the way that they are? Simple, one word: faith. This is what resistance is. When you have faith that things will be better, and if they don't, it's okay, because we're fighting for a righteous cause.
As I've been listening to you, Marwa, I couldn't help but notice that you have an image of Che Guevara over your left shoulder,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah, I got that. I got that with me from Cuba. After visiting Cuba and learning from there about the history, that man is the man. So I'm very proud to have friends who have either lived throughout the revolution, who have kids and grandkids who continue the revolution in Cuba, because I think that we are very much alike. And for me, he's just as important as Said Hassan Nasrallah right now, because he changed the course of history, just as I believe that my leader is doing the same. So yeah, much love to my friends across the pond.
So next, I'd like to talk to you about the prospect of the military resistance and what is likely to unfold and what it might achieve. And I'd like to put to you a proposition and see what your reaction is to this as someone who lives in the region and understands the resistance so well, and also understands, I think, the Zionist colony quite well. You've had to live with it in one form or another beside you, kilometers away from you for many years. You know, the debate in the West around the military calculus is whether the resistance can defeat Israel militarily. In other words, whether it can effectively destroy its army. I think that that's the wrong question. And this is what the proposition that I want to put to you and see how you react to it. I don't think that the resistance needs to destroy Israel's army in order to deal a fatal blow to the Zionist colony. All it has to do is destroy the Zionist sense of security.
Security.
Yeah, exactly. So to the point where they are having to live with the reality that people in the region, the indigenous peoples of the region, have had to deal with for generations, which is you never know when a bomb is going to fall upon you and kill your children. You never know when an army will invade your land and whether you'll even be expelled from your home and deprived of access to it forever. You have this constant state of uncertainty surrounding you and your life. I don't think that this is anything which well, certainly the vast majority of the Zionist population of Israel has had to deal with in their lifetimes. They've been living with the belief, whether it was true or not, that they are impervious, they are invulnerable, they cannot be destroyed. So to give you an example of what I think could potentially, I'm not saying that this would be sufficient, but potentially cause a fatal blow to the sense of security that Zionists have living in occupied Palestine. I think if the coming attack just basically demolished an important airbase, a single airbase, and left it in smoking ruins, unusable, and caused casualties, I think that that would be a very, very serious blow to the Zionist sense of security. Something like that has not happened in the lifetimes of virtually everybody, every Zionist living in Israel today. But perhaps it wouldn't be enough. Perhaps there would have to be more. But essentially, do you agree with this proposition that the goal here from the resistance perspective, to free the Palestinian people is not necessarily to destroy Israel's military, but to
100%.
destroy the sense of
And
security?
by the way, this is what Said Hassan, because being part of the region, I followed through every speech for Said Hassan Nasrallah for the past at least 20 years. And during those battles, there was a very important speech for Said Nasrallah where he said, we might not need to fire one bullet at Israel. We might not need to do that. Israelis are fully capable because since then, strife inside of Israeli communities started to build up. If you remember, before October 7, there were at least 54 to 56 weeks of weekly protests in the streets of Tel Aviv and across occupied Palestine against their government, against Netanyahu in specific. So Sayyid Nasrallah was talking about the essence of strife within the community itself, saying that they can self-destruct and we will help, and not necessarily help in the self-destruction militarily. We have a lot of strategies to do it otherwise. So when you say it doesn't necessarily have to be destructive, of course, because look, we believe in our resistance, Dimitri, but we are realists. We know that Zionist Israel is fully capable to do exactly the same in Beirut of what it did in Gaza. We know they have the means and the capabilities, but it's not the same as Gaza because Gaza is just 20% of South Lebanon on its own. Lebanon is huge. Hezbollah is at least 10 times larger than Hamas, at least in the human power, and with the firepower much more advanced, which means that even if they want to do a 10% destruction to Beirut of what they did to Gaza, a 10% destruction will be reciprocated towards them. Yes, their destruction will be far more advanced because the weapons that they are using, the bombs that they are using are being dropped by fire jets, by war jets, by fighter jets. In Lebanon, we don't have fighter jets, not that I know of, but we don't have fighter jets. But we have missiles, long-range missiles, medium-range missiles, and short-range missiles. And we have them guided. We have them smart. They have been developed. And anyone who can see what happened to Meron base 7 kilometers away from Lebanon can understand that Ramon Air Base, the biggest air base in the heart of occupied Palestine, can easily be targeted by Hezbollah. So now the issue is not whether or not who is capable of doing the destruction, because destruction can be reciprocated in different means. The question here is, when a bomb fell in Beirut last week, actually there were 3 bombs, 2 of them exploded, the 3rd one did not explode. When those bombs were dropped on a civilian area, one of the most populated areas, I'm not going to say in the world because Lebanon is too small to say in the world, but at least in the region, because the suburbs of Beirut, the southern suburb of Beirut, it's a small swath of land that has more than 2 million humans living in it. 2 million. That's not counting the actual capital. It's the southern part of the capital only. So you can imagine how much populated it is. The same moment, I had a friend whose house was 1 block away from the explosion.
Which
He
explosion,
couldn't get
Marwa? The explosion that killed
last
Fuad
week.
Shatour?
Last week.
Right, right,
Of Fuad Shatour.
right.
Last week, and I was talking to him when I came back from Venezuela, and he told me, you know what happened? He said I'm 100%. And I said, now I'm 100% sure that Israel cannot take us down. I said, why? He said, when the moment that explosion happened, 10 months after people watching genocide and the horrors of genocide, I couldn't get my car out of the parking space. He had to leave his building on foot and go to his sister's house about 5 or 6 kilometers away because of the number of motorcycles and cars that were headed towards the explosion. My people are crazy. Look, we're crazy, okay? But I'm talking about the mental model. Now, look at the borderline between Lebanon and occupied Palestine. In a depth of 20 kilometers, 20 from the line, uninhabitable. There are houses, it can be inhabited, but no humans can be found. Why? They ran away. Do you think any of those living on the border with Lebanon, even if tomorrow the war ends, you think they'll come back to their houses? Mm-hmm. Sorry, to the houses that they stole from Palestinians or erected on Palestinian stolen land? You can watch Israeli media. Some of it sometimes is translated, but you can watch it, you can see the transcript, take it, translate it, and know what they're talking. There are a lot of reports that were done with those people who were taken into Tel Aviv, into hotels, that say that we need a complete and comprehensive solution. And even if that solution is attained, we're not going back. They should find somewhere else to put us. That's the difference between a native and a settler. So when you talk about the security of Zionist Israel and you say that they can bomb a big military base, trust me, if one bomb falls on the shores of Tel Aviv, the way that the shores of Gaza were burnt in hellfire by the fire of the Israelis with US-made weapons, if one bomb, one strike, one rocket falls on the shores of Tel Aviv, there will know, you want on the shores, not attacking anyone, the shores, okay, not having any casualties. You will not see civilians, settlers in Tel Aviv anymore. Look at what happened when Ansarullah sent in their drone after the massacre in Mawasi, in the Mawasi camp in Rafah. Ansarullah vowed retaliation, and they sent in a drone towards Tel Aviv, and it's exploded in that building, as you remember, just a couple of meters away from the American consulate there, American embassy. And the entire neighborhood was emptied. People refused to go back. The number of humans that left Tel Aviv since then, you can find the numbers on Israeli media. Up until now, when Ben Gurion airport was put out of service because they shut it down, they said that we want to stop the flights because of what's going on. We don't have any information as to when and where it will happen, so we might as well just shut down the airport. According to the Israeli Interior Ministry, there is more than 100,000 Israeli settlers who are stuck outside. When they say stuck outside, they don't tell you why they left. They don't want to come back. I have a friend in Cyprus who's really, really worried that at the moment there are more than 10,000 Israelis who took refuge in Cyprus, who most probably won't be back in time for schools, which means that they will enroll their kids in the schools of Cyprus. Cyprus is being occupied by Israelis under the noses of the Cypriots and other also Mediterranean European countries. So the issue of basically shaking the security of Zionist Israel is not that hard for anyone to do. Look at the psychological warfare that the Iranians and Hezbollah and the Yemenis and the Iraqis have been doing over the past week. They're not sleeping at night.
Yeah.
The night before, last night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, Hezbollah sent in 50 Katyusha rockets. Katyusha, that's like the least level of rockets. 50 Katyusha rockets into a new area, into 15 new settlements, to retaliate for the massacre that happened in Sham'a town, South Lebanon, where 5 Syrians were killed, 3 Lebanese, and 10 were wounded, 10 Lebanese. 5 Syrians, including a mother and 3 children. They are Syrian refugees living in that town of Sham'a. They were bombed by Zionist Israel. So Hezbollah retaliated with 50 rockets further inside of occupied Palestine. I think you saw the videos, and you saw the panic that ensued inside the settler communities. I agree with you. I agree with you 110%. It doesn't need to take a full-fledged war to make Israel completely decimate and break down from inside.
And once that happens, they're the first people who will leave.
Are the Zionist settlers, are the Zionist Europeans who are not even native to the entire region. And I think if one video from the Hezbollah military media is ever published showing Hezbollah fighters crossing that wall that they already opened, no one's going to be there to watch what happens next.
So lastly, I'm going to ask you to prognosticate about the future, even though you're not a military expert, as I understand it, but I'm nonetheless curious to know. Everybody, of course, is asking this question. Anyone who cares about war and peace, what is the resistance going to do?
Reciprocate.
Correct.
Reciprocate. And I think Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah will have a speech tomorrow, Tuesday at 5 p.m. Beirut time. And the speech would be in commemoration of Commander Fuad Shukr. And it's going to be for the 7th day. In Islam, we commemorate the funeral and then the 7th day of the fallen, either a victim, martyr, or just someone who passed away. So on the 7th, on the first week of commemorating his assassination, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah will give a speech. Because of that date and that time, it's being said that most probably tonight will be the retaliation. For me, I say, I don't know. I seriously don't know. But what I know, that's about the when. But for the how, I know because Sayyid Nasrallah already said it during the funeral processions. He said, he spoke with the Israelis and told them, look, you crossed the red line in 4 different variables. Variable number 1, you targeted the capital Beirut. That's the first red line. Number 2, you targeted a residential area. That's the second red line. Number 3, you killed civilians, including children. Number 4, you assassinated one of our top commanders in the resistance. Which means the retaliation of Hezbollah is always measured to a certain degree. It's always reciprocation. This time, and you know very well, because we've watched Hudhud 1, 2, and 3, we've seen that Hezbollah is capable of targeting civilian areas, settler areas, but they have been refraining from it because Israelis should thank whatever God they pray to, because the resistance in Hezbollah is a pious one, the one of piety and piety and integrity and dignity, because they refuse to kill settlers, even if those settlers are illegally here. They only target military bases. But now, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said it's 4 valuables. We will reciprocate equally, meaning capital for capital, despite the fact that we know and we don't accept Tel Aviv to be the capital of occupied Palestine, but they consider it to be their capital. So I'm sure it's going to be there. I'm sure. 2, because otherwise, how else would you deter Zionist Israel from bombing Beirut again? If you bomb our capital, we will bomb yours. And this has been said by Sayyid Nasrallah many, many times before. But this time he said, capital, residential area, civilians, and military commander. When? I don't know.
Well, if they do, in fact, carry out an attack of that nature, Marwa, we are going to be in for an extraordinarily difficult period, because I can't imagine that Israel will finally come to its senses and say, we're not going to escalate this any further. The behavior of Israel historically has been,
we don't care.
I understand.
are their children more worth than ours? They've killed so far 17,000 in 10 months, babies in
Yes.
Gaza, babies. What?
And I
Is our
understand.
blood
Understand.
impure?
Yes. But my point is simply that all of this suggests, and I've been of this view from the very beginning, after
Yeah,
seeing that Western governments were completely unwilling to impose any restraint on Israel. They were going to support
yeah,
Israel militarily, economically, politically, no matter how many lines it crossed, no matter what atrocities it committed. It then became very clear that this is going to be resolved militarily. It had
yeah.
there's no other alternative. They have the power to stop this in a non-military manner, Western governments.
Well,
But
you know that you know that it is that serious when you have Sergei Shoigu in Tehran himself. When he himself flew today and met with Iranian officials, top IRGC and Iranian army officials, you know that it's that serious.
he was the previous, just so people don't recognize the names, Sergei Shoigu was the defense minister of the Russian Federation up until I think a few months ago, and he's now a member of
Yeah,
the Russian Security Council, which is a
council.
core entity of the national security of Russia.
Yeah,
That's quite interesting. And of course,
yeah.
the Russian Federation has plenty of incentive to arm the adversaries of the United
That's
States.
what Putin said today. Yeah.
Right, right.
So we're looking at some very interesting yet worrying times, but at the same time, no liberation movement ever made it without sacrifice. And if that's the bill that we have to pay, we're ready.
On that note, Marwa, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today and for being my first guest on Women of the Resistance.
My pleasure and my honor, Dimitri, always here at your service. And thank you very much for highlighting the causes and the struggle of my people and my nation. And I understand you're of Greek origin, so we're basically from the same region. We are Mediterranean, so we do understand very well what it means to pay blood for your land, for your dignity. And it's something that's very important for us. And we really appreciate the people like you who highlight those issues.
Thank you so much, Marwa. And this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal on August 5th, 2024.